All right. Good evening and happy Thursday, everybody. We hope you're staying safe wherever you may be during COVID 19, these fires, and that very orange sky we had yesterday. We're almost into fall, which usually it means the hiring blitz for those looking for one last gasp of the calendar year. However, with COVID, plans have changed, but some companies are still hiring. And we're going to help you get into those today. That's why we brought in Honey Patel, founder of Career Companionship and a product strategy manager at companies notably such as Uber and Safeway, companies you've heard of. She's developed career technologies that you will use today to help you growth hack your way into your next job opportunity. As this is a workshop, taking notes and being tuned into some of the websites that Honey has shared is going to be really helpful and go a long way in helping you develop that strategy. So go ahead and get those if you need, because you're going to be doing some good learning today. Honey, welcome. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you now, and thank you again for your time and helping us out here on Albert's List.
Thank you, Albert. Super excited to be here. This is the second time I'm collaborating with Albert on an event, and I'm super excited to share growth hack techniques with you guys. Just a couple of things before I get started. Take notes, yes, because everyone has their unique style of taking notes, but don't worry about it. I'll send you guys the presentation if you need. I will be sharing my screen, so if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and Melly or Albert, if one of you guys can just kind of interrupt me and pause, and I can address questions, and I'll have some time at the end to address any questions you guys might have. Does that sound good? All right, let's dive in. Can you see my screen okay? Awesome. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm Honey Patel. Honey is my real name. Past about 10 years, I've worked for small and large companies doing the full business life cycle. So I've done marketing, I've done product management, I've done HR, I've done finance. And I've really enjoyed that because I got to touch multiple different functions in a business. But the three core things that were part of my career is strategy and planning. So helping companies define their strategy. Second is doing business operations. That's like the core of my passion and my experience. And finally, doing product management. I think building and launching products there's just an enormous amount of joy in that. But lately, one of the things that I've figured, and something that I've been working on for the past 2 years, is building my own businesses and building my own technology. So I'm not ready to be a full-blown entrepreneur yet, but soon I'm looking to expand out and kind of chime into those entrepreneur skills. But today I actually want to talk to you about my career in the past and how I've been successful in my career and some tips that I used, as well as how I took those tips and turned it into a product. So a few advices that have stuck with me throughout my entire career. One is embrace failure. So you'll feel sometimes that, hey, I'm failing at something, or an event that happens where you feel like you've failed. Embrace it. Think of it as a learning instead of a failure. Make your own path. As you can see here, I didn't follow the normal corporate ladder. I didn't go from like the specialist to a manager to a senior manager. I jumped around. I wanted to try different things. I wanted to work for different companies. So you can make your own path. And that doesn't mean that you won't have a career persona or a career profile because you'll be all over the place. You can still build your own path and build your own brand. Another is jungle experience. This is something the Facebook COO, Sheryl Sandberg, has talked about a lot. Is that, again, you don't have to just go to marketing. You don't have to just go to product management. You can do different things. You can be like a monkey in a jungle and try around different things. From the famous graduation speech by Steve Jobs, connecting the dots, right? I think the first 5 to 6 years in my career, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I wanted to do a bunch of different things. But as I grew in my career, I was able to go back and connect the dots of like, okay, if you manage these 4 functions, it's business operations. And then I became like the business operations go-to person for that. Embrace the wisdom of uncertainty. Again, I didn't know if my next role was going to be marketing, if my next role was going to be product management. I knew it was going to be something in the business operations arena, but I was able to embrace this uncertainty. So be comfortable with that. And then finally, the crux of what we're going to talk about today is that you're the CEO of your career. Generally, what happens is we think that, hey, my manager or my mentor or my coach or my partner or my friends or my colleagues, all these people are responsible for influencing your career. They're only responsible for influencing and not anything else. So you are the CEO of your career and you have to manage your career, which means you define what you want and what your brand is. You carry that out and bring it to life. And so because that statement resonated so well with me, and because I was able to use that so much in my life, I actually built tools to help people become the CEOs of their own career. And so there's 3 free tools that I have. One is Career Companion. This is where you can build your career playbook. A lot of the tips that I'm going to share today are actually going to be using Career Companion. Second is Growth Companion. It's to tack on to Career Companion, learning guides, how to be a good communicator, how to manage your career, how to increase self-awareness, how to get more work done. There's a lot of and I'm in the process right now of building a leadership one. And then finally, the latest one that I launched is I realized that Career Companion was great for a tool for people to use, but sometimes it's really hard to go and do it yourself. And then Growth Companion was great because there's a lot of content, but what people really needed is some specific advice. And so with my personalized plan, what you can do is it's a Google Maps for your career. So you basically fill in where you are now and where you want to go. And then I actually go in and build you out a specific career growth plan of what the actions and the steps you should take to get from to your destination. So those are the free tools we'll use. I'll send out the links, so don't worry about that. But let me jump in. So what I want to do is I actually want to talk about 3 frameworks, and then I'm going to talk about 10 specific tips. So the first framework, you might have heard of this. It's called a T-shaped career. So when you think about like what you do, right? People will be like, hey, I'm in marketing, very general. People will be like, yeah, I do a lot of different things. I'm in business operations. Don't really know what that means. But if you think about the T-shaped career, there's 3 things. You can be an expert in one thing, which is an I-shaped career, right? So you're an expert in, let's say, branding when it comes to marketing. You can be a hyphen shaped career, which is you're capable of a lot of different things. You can do social media, you can do brand, you can do product marketing, you can do events marketing. There's all these different aspects of marketing. But when you think about a T-shaped career, you can be an expert in one thing and still be capable of a lot of things. So your ideal career profile should be a T-based career. So you can think about your career right now, right? Are you an expert in one thing, or are you capable of a lot of things, or are you at the perfect intersection of a T, where if you were able to be an expert in, let's say, social media, but if tomorrow you had to take on a branding job, could you do it? Could you learn from it? Could you take on the role and be successful at it, right? So there's a lot of things you can do to expand your capability in terms of your breadth of knowledge. And then there's also a lot of things where you can become an expert. In the day and the age where we are, where the businesses are constantly evolving and the world is constantly evolving, a T-shaped career is ideal. Next is thinking about your career journey. So a lot of times we think that, okay, I have a linear career journey. I go to college, I graduate, I get my first job, I get promoted, I become a manager, I become a director, I become a leader, or I become a manager, or I stay as an individual contributor, and that's where I am. And people always feel stuck in their career. And the reason why people feel stuck is because they're on this line, and there isn't much movement that happens on this line. And so think about your career in this model that I came up with. It's called EEE. It's called Explore, Experience, and Evolve. So you can explore who you are, what you want, what do you want to be, what role do you want, what company you want to work for. All that is an exploration phase. Then the next phase is your experience. Like that's actually building out the credibility and the experiences for what you've done in exploration. So going back to the marketing example, you can explore that you're in social media, you want to become a product marketer. So in order to get that experience, you may go get some certificates or education. You may attend events. You may actually go get a product marketing job, a couple of jobs to help you build that experience. And so that's the experience. And then there's the evolution. So what will happen is you'll evolve. You might reach a point where you feel like you have learned enough, or you want to try something new. And that's when you evolve, where you might become a leader in that, or you might become a subject matter expert. And then after that, you're going to go back to exploration. This is going to happen in your career multiple times, where you'll explore, you'll build your experience, you'll evolve. You'll explore, you'll build your experience, and you'll evolve. So when you think about your journey, or when you feel stuck in your career, like, okay, what's my next role? What do I do now? I feel stuck. what is the next milestone for me. Don't think about the promotion or the new job. That's not always the two direction you can move. You can think about, am I building my experience and my credibility? Am I evolving from experience that I've already built, or am I exploring the next thing that I want to do? All right. And then when you think about who you are, I really like this model. It's called a career ikigai. It comes from a Japanese concept of reason for being, right? So who you are is a reason for being. And fundamentally, it's a sweet spot of four things. One is, what do you love to do? What is something that you really enjoy and that you love? What is something that a business needs or the world needs? There's a need for you to do something. What is something you can be paid for, right? Because we have to pay the bills. And then what is something that you're good at? So when you intersect these 4 points, you find your ikigai, which is your sweet spot of your career, right? A lot of times people feel stuck or unhappy in their career, or like, I don't know what to do. It's because this ikigai is off balance. You may be doing something that you're good at, but you don't love it, or you don't get paid for it. You may be doing something that there's a need for, but again, you don't love it, and maybe you're not even good at it, right? So when there's an off balance in this, you can feel that in your life and in your career. So it's really important that when you're picking a job, when you're picking a role, you think about that. Okay, is this something I love? Is this something I'm good at? Am I going to get paid well, that I want to get paid? And is this a real need? Is there a problem that I'm solving? Right? So those are the 3 things to think about from an overarching standpoint in your career. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you to 10 specific tips. These are all action-based. I'll go through each one of them. If you log into Career Companion, I have screenshots on the right that kind of follow the different modules. But again, focus more on the listening and the content, and then you can always go back and do this later. So one is answer core questions. You might have done this exercise when you were in college or through a career center, where they're like, okay, answer core questions. What bores you? What energizes you? What do you want to be? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? There's all these questions that you can ask yourself, and not once, but on an ongoing basis, to truly understand who you are and what you want. So if you go into Career Companion, there's a list of 500 questions that you can answer. So really take the time to answer these questions. Next, be able to answer them, like nail them verbally anytime. When you're meeting with your mentor, or when you're meeting with your coach, or even your manager, and especially important for interviews, you want to be able to not just have these written down where you've thought about them and internalized them, but you also want to be able to verbalize them and speak to them if somebody asks you this question. I know, so for example, right now I'm in the middle of interviewing for a role internally, and I have spent maybe 2 to 3 hours preparing for just the questions, like, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Because I've written them down, because I can reference them, and because I have like verbally stated them out, I am much better in my interviews and being able to speak to them and articulate them very well. And then finally, this is not a one-time exercise, right? When you want to answer these questions, you want to do them on an ongoing basis. You want to answer, sometimes you might want to actually answer the ones you've already answered. Like this question, what energizes me? Literally every month, what energizes me changes, right? So you want to go back and think about, okay, what's energizing me this month? What am I motivated about this month? What are my goals this month? So you want to revisit the ones you've already answered, but you also want to answer new ones for perspective. So super important. Every month, go back and think about maybe 5 to 6 or even like 10, as much time you have possible to answer questions to help you prepare for interviews and to help you better understand yourself. Second is know your values. This is something that leadership, like when you go through a leadership training course or when you go through some sort of a leadership academy, they're going to have you do this. They're going to have you identify your values. But you don't really need to be a leader to do that. This is an exercise that you should start early in your career and you should continue doing as you grow. Because your values are your inner GPS. They drive you about who you are and what you want, right? If your value is, for example, having a work-life balance, the kind of jobs that you should pick should align with making sure that you have a work-life balance. These are things that will help you make decisions in your career. And one of the questions that I always love to like ask myself anytime I feel stuck, or when I'm doing something, like, hey, am I willing to get up early and stay up late to do this? Is this a job that's going to excite me, that I'm willing to wake up at 6 a.m., especially if I'm not a morning person, or I'm willing to stay up all night to do, especially if I like to sleep, right? So when you just simply ask that question to yourself and align the decisions you're making with your values, they make a huge difference on your career happiness and your career bliss. And then last, and this is really an exercise that you have to do, you can't just identify your values and be like, okay, my values are, for example, like resilience or action oriented or being open-minded. You have to define what they mean for you, because all values have different meanings for different people. So what work-life balance may mean to me may mean something very different to Albert or to Melly or to somebody else. So you really have to be like, okay, what does being open-minded mean to me? And you have to write that down. And then when you're making your decisions or taking actions on your career, be like, hey, am I taking these actions in alignment with the values I've identified? If I want to be an open-minded person, and if I'm in a meeting room and I don't really ask for other people's opinions or thoughts before making a decision, am I really acting in alignment with my value, right? So that's a check you can do on an ongoing basis. That's a quick mental check you can do on every day. Be like, hey, today, the actions that I took, did they align with the values that I've identified? So super important to know your values and to make decisions and take actions in alignment with those values. Everyone with me so far? Awesome. Okay, third is cultivate your competencies. So competencies are super, super important and super, super underrated. I learned the value of competencies maybe in the last 5 years when I got promoted or not promoted based on that. So what a lot of companies do is they promote their employees, or they even hire, fire, or promote based on the competencies you possess. And the competencies, there's quite a few things that can go with competencies. But one, what a competency is, it's a combination of skill, knowledge, and attribute. So something like being customer oriented, or being and having an ability to build a vision, or being able to resolve conflict, right? These are competencies. These are competencies that are observable. You can measure them. You can say you're really good at it, you're really bad at it, or you're okay at it. They can be performance based. A lot of performance reviews are based on these competencies, and they're transferable. So it's not something like, hey, I'm good at Google Drive, or I'm good at email. That's a technical skill. A competency is like, hey, I'm good at conflict management, and that can be applied in customer situations, customer management. So those can be applied in internal team situations. That can be applied in a manager-employee situations. So competencies are skills that help you do your job and do them effectively. And so a lot of people don't even know that, hey, my competency is conflict management, and that's something that I'm good at, and that's something that I do in all my roles. My competency is building strategy. My competency is executing. My competency is project management. So there's all these a list of competencies that you have to identify. Which ones are you really good at that you're going to amplify? Which ones are you not so good at that actually may be important, or actually may not be important, and you don't have to focus on them? And which one are you okay at? Okay, so competencies, super, super important. So I'm going to pause right there. I'm actually going to stop sharing, and I'd love to hear from a few folks in the room, if you're open to sharing, what do you think are like your 2 to 3 most common competencies that you use on a daily basis? Ismaili.
Okay, I'll start. So 2 competencies I think that come really naturally to me are connecting with people. I'm very interested in my team, people that I work with. So that's just always been one of my core competencies. And then number 2 is my curiosity. When I'm curious about something, like, I have to ask, right? So 2 of those hard skills, I'll save that for later. Maybe if we can get other people to chime in. Anyone else? Should we call on people?
Sure.
Okay, George, come on down, George. You don't have to come on down. what are your core competencies? Is he listening?
He's on mute if he's speaking.
Okay. Are people starting happy hour without us?
Sorry. No worries. Anybody else? How about Michelle Gray?
Hi. So my core competencies, the first one I would say would be attention to detail. So like I'm a real perfectionist when it comes to everything, data, content, everything. And my other core competency would be, I really love analytics, and like be able to measure the results of marketing campaigns and things, and then make data-driven decisions based on the results.
Thank you.
Great.
Welcome.
All right, I will keep going. All right. Next, we are on tip 4. We have 6 more to go after this. Is take personality tests. I know a lot of people can be like, oh, those are fun. I go on Facebook, I take a personality test. But honestly, there's a lot of great personality tests that can give you really good insights about you and your behavior and your actions and your strengths and how you make decisions. And all these things don't just have an effect in your career, they also have an effect in your life. And so super important to take some of these personality tests, get in tune with yourself and increase self-awareness. The other thing that they can help with is figuring out a career path. That's pretty common. I know a lot of folks take a personality test to help them identify a career path. And I know it's used very commonly for leadership development. I know when I was first becoming a leader and the company gave me a leadership coach, which I was super fortunate and thankful for, the first thing she made me do is go and take like 6 personality tests on how I deal with conflict and what my Myers-Briggs is and what my strengths are. And she's like, you really have to, as a leader, you really have to know yourself. And these personality tests are a great way to know yourself. And then finally, I think these are also great to know other people. And so one of the things that I've done in the tool is you can take your personality test and you can put them on your profile and you can share that with people. So you can see that, hey, what type of person is Melly? Like, especially if I'm working with her or if I'm managing her or if there's other like peers or customers, like you can build stronger relationships when you know them better. And this isn't necessarily like, you still need to get to know them on a personal level, but it's like, hey, if someone is like a ENTJ or type A personality like me, maybe you want to approach them differently from someone who's a type B or more on like the feeling or the perception side, right? So just a little bit of information can go a long way about yourself and about others. And personality tests are a great way to do that. Next is, this is like the most important thing that I will say today. Roles don't last, relationships do. So you will think about like my next role, becoming a manager, this role, those roles will go away. If I think about the last 10 years of my career, yes, I remember the titles of the company. Yes, I remember the job I did and where I worked, vaguely what the office looked like. But the most important thing I remember is the people that I worked with and the relationships that I built. And so there's quite a few ways to do this. One is, you really want to, in all your jobs and the people that you work with, you want to develop empathy and trust with people. And empathy and trust in a working environment is super important, because when you're trying to achieve something as a team, the empathy and trust will help you get things done faster. The second thing you want to remember is people provide opportunities. When I got promoted, or it was based on competency, but it was also based on my manager believing in me. When I got a job, especially in my career where I was doing things that are different from what I've done before, and I didn't necessarily have the expertise in that, the people believed in me and said, hey, yes, I think you can do it. So super important that remember that people are the ones who provide opportunities. And a great way to build relationship is to give people time and information, right? One of the great things that I like to do is just set up like one-on-ones that are not necessarily about work, even with like people at work. Be like, hey, how are you? How's your family? Connect with them on a little bit more personal level. And that's also a great way of building trust, is when you get to know someone. And then also share information, right? Anytime I come across a cool article or a cool book or a podcast, I share it along with my coworkers. And there's nothing awkward about that. You'd be like, hey, I found this article that I thought would be super interesting to you, or I've been listening to this podcast that you might find very interesting. And that's how you build relationships, by giving time and information to people. One of the things that I've built in Career Companion is a tool for you to manage like the people in your life, right? I call it build your dream team. Like, who's your mentor, who's your boss, who's your champion, who's your sponsor, and just tracking like who they are, how you know them, and any like important meetings that you have with them. So for example, Andy, who was my boss, my second job like 8 years ago, is still a mentor for me, and I still connect with him on a monthly basis. And I track like I don't track all my meetings with him, since we do like coffees and lunches and dinners, but I track like the important conversations I have with him about my career or my goals. I track those so I can keep track of my learnings. Next is attend events and network, right? So it's great that you're attending this event and you're networking, but 3 really good things to do when you're attending events is, 1, stand out of the crowd by being part of the event, right? So if you are, let's say there's this head of X series going on, and every week they're doing an event on like head of engineering, head of product, head of design. One way you can be part of that event is be like, hey, I'd love to volunteer to do some work that you may need. And that way you're part of the event build and the event team, rather than just being in the crowd, right? And it's a great way for you to like connect easily with people. So find a way to like help the organizers. Second is set specific goals for the events that you want to attend. So like, hey, I want to meet 3 people, or I want to meet 3 new people, or I want to connect with 2 people that I already know, because I haven't really connected with them in the past year, but I know they're attending this event. So I want to, touch base with them. I want to learn on this new topic. So identify specific goals and objectives. And then finally, reflect after the event. What did you learn? Who did you meet? What were your action items? So an event is not just about like signing up and showing up. There's two important pieces that people miss. It's pre-event, like having an intention of what you want to do, and then post-event, reflecting on what you learned. So for example, BizOpsCon, this is an event that I attended in 2017. And I tracked before event. I said, hey, I want to network with business professionals because I want to build a community of business operations people. So my goal was to really just network. And then after event, I learned all these things from the event, mostly content that I actually noted down, took notes, and I tracked it in here. What happens is people like take mental notes or take it in their phone or email it to themselves, and then they lose it. With Career Companion, you will have it always available at your fingertips, right? So this is a great way to keep track of the events you attend, your goals, and then what you learned. Next is setting SMART goals. So again, people in their career, they think that, okay, my goal is to get a job, or my goal is to get promoted. Your career is not just about getting the next job or getting promoted or becoming a manager, right? People bucket themselves in these 3 categories. So don't limit it to that. There's so many other goals that you can set to constantly develop and grow yourself. For example, asking for feedback. That's something that we may not be always good at, but you can, on a monthly basis, you can be like, hey, once a month, I want to reach out to my peer or my manager or someone I work with and get feedback on how I've been doing. Or you want to be like, hey, one of my goals is to show appreciation to people. And so one of the goals that I had is like, hey, once a month, I want to send a thank you note and a personal note to somebody that I work with to let them know that I appreciate them. So there's all these different types of goals in your career that you can have. There's hard goals and there's soft goals. And so you want to identify, okay, what are these that I want to work on? And then you want to check in on them and track them and make sure you build a habit around them. All right, next is career assets. So your career assets are like your resume, your social media links, your cover letter. I have templates, like pre-configured templates for when I want to introduce 2 people, when I'm requesting a referral. So there's all these assets these are like hard assets for your career. I make sure not be job searching. I read all the time. If there's something that's interesting to me, I want to quickly be able to utilize my most updated resume, quickly be able to utilize my cover letter, my portfolio, my website, whatever it is, and send it to them and initiate that conversation. It may lead to something. It may not lead to something, right? But at least you're not waiting to be like, oh, I have to update my resume. I have to write you a cover letter. You don't have to wait to do those things. You can just take 10 minutes, honestly, just 10 minutes in your career, in your week or in your month, to keep all these things updated and then ready all that time. The next is you can use templates and tools as a foundation. There's so many resume tools out there and website tools and like resources on how to make your LinkedIn profile the best. So use those, but stand out by making it unique. So use those tools as a foundation, but customize it to make it unique to you. And then third is you can get professional help. Fiverr, Upwork, there's all these marketplaces and websites where you can, not for a lot of money, for very cheap, you can get a nice logo done for your site, or you can get an actual website built. You can get a resume designed. There's all these things you can do for super cheap. So you can get that professional help for not a lot of money, and it will really, really help you stand out, right? So you want to make sure that recruiters are looking at maybe 300 to 400 resumes, especially these days, 300 to 400 resumes in an hour, okay, in 1 hour. 1 hour. So how are you going to stand out from 300 to 400 people? Is you have to be unique. And Melly's giving me the timeout, so I'm going to pause because she's going to chime in here.
Okay, so everybody signed up here because they need to stand out with these recruiters, right? So what is your number one recommendation to stand out? So you're a recruiter and this is your job. You know, your eyeballs are probably popping out of your head because you're looking at the same thing. So what will catch a recruiter's eye visually super quick?
Yeah,
in your opinion?
I think one thing that I've done in my resume is just adding a little bit of color. People think resumes need to be black and white. And traditionally, they could be black and white because you have to print them and you want to print black and white. But these days, your resume can have a little, so all my job titles are colors, are like blue. And then the other thing you can do, which is something I've done in my resume, is you can bold specific words in each of the sentences of your resume, like whether you write a paragraph or bullet points, and just bold the important words. So the important words could be like, I built a strategy for this, highlight strategy for this. An important word, I designed 25 KPIs for this. Highlight, define the KPIs, right? So you can bold specific words. So when they're scanning through, the bold words are going to pop out and nobody reads your full resume. Okay, and it's super important to have a full resume and write it, but nobody reads the full resume. They skim through and they look at the titles and they look at the dates and they look at the keywords in your text underneath each of the jobs. So find a way to stand out in that process.
Okay, I have another question. So do you recommend inserting a photo of yourself in the resume, or no? Is that a faux pas? Like, do we not do that?
So I personally don't do that because I think what happens these days is people can just go to your LinkedIn and your headshot is already there. So you don't need to take up space in your resume for a headshot, but because your LinkedIn will have it. I think you want to make the most of your resume and have the most important like accomplishments, milestones, strengths, skill sets, technical skills, all that.
Okay, so don't be afraid to use color is what I heard, right? And also don't be afraid to use fonts and highlight really important accomplishments, right? Okay, so I just want to make sure we're giving the most valuable tips that we can here. Thank you.
Good questions. Any other questions? Feel free to use the chat, or I'll just pause for a second if anybody has any questions. Okay, I will keep going. You guys are doing great, and we are almost a little bit over halfway through. All right. So remember earlier I said you're the CEO of your career. So if you're the CEO, you're going to have customers. And so who are your customers? Each of your job is your customer. So every company that you work with, you have to think of that company as your customer. And you are providing your services and your skills and your values to that customer. So one thing that's super important is you want to keep track of all the information on your career in one place. And you can do this in Career Companion. As you can see on the right, those are all my jobs. You can see the title and the location. And when you actually click in on them, you can track who did you interview with? When was your interview? Super important, especially when you're interviewing and you're interviewing with multiple companies. You want to keep track of what job, what's in the interview stage, what's in the application stage, when is your interview, and actually reflect on the interview. How prepare for the interview, do the interview, and reflect on that interview. Yes, Melly.
Okay, so we have a question here, and the question is, what color font do you suggest for the resume?
So I like to stick to neutral colors, nothing crazy like pink or yellow or something that's hard to read. But good neutral colors are blue, dark blue, maroon, and green. Those three I would say, because they are enough of a color, but they still blend in well with the black.
Okay, let me put this in the chat. Honey talks a mile a minute, even when she tries not to. Okay, so blue, what did you say, honey? Blue what?
Blue and maroon.
Blue, maroon. So like bright blue, navy blue, I mean,
Navy blue.
navy blue. Navy blue, guys, don't go nuts. Okay.
I'm going to some colors. So it's a good question, by the way. I think designers have a lot of liberty and they design up their resume to look really creative. And I think that's something that you would expect from a designer. But if you have your normal profile that's not a designer based, you want to stick to neutral colors. Okay, so back to your customer, your job, being your customer, you want to track your interview information, your offer information, and then your performance reviews. Super, super important on the performance reviews. What will happen is you will work at a job, you'll set goals, you'll get performance reviews, you'll get feedback. There may be a system at your job where this information is tracked. There may not be a system at your job where this information is not tracked. However, when you leave that job, all that poof disappears. So you want to make sure that it doesn't disappear, and you actually, because there's a lot of valuable information in those performance reviews, in those feedback, in the goals that you set, in those projects that you work on. So you want to, and this is why I feel Career Companion. I used to track all this in a Google Doc. I had a Google Doc, and I would keep track of like all the companies I applied for, the places I interviewed, who I interviewed with, what were my performance review feedback. And so I've kind of built a system where you can track all that, and there's a house for all this information. And it's super useful because you can go back to it, especially when you're interviewing and looking for your next job, and be like, okay, what was the feedback that I got that I should improve on? Who did I interview with that one time where the interview went really well? Let me go and look at my notes. What did I do well? And you can kind of take that. Or you can go back and be like, hey, I really didn't get that job. I wonder what happened in the interview. Did I not address the questions? And so you can go and take that learning and apply it to your next job. So you can't do that if you haven't thought about it, if you haven't documented it, if you haven't reflected on it. And we're going to get to reflection in like one slide, in next slide, but super important to consume all this information, keep track of it, and apply it for your next play. And so the last thing and the most important thing is reflection. So the beautiful thing about reflection is that it deepens your learning. Okay, whether it's from an interview, whether it's from a job, whether it's from an event, whether it's from a project that you worked on, reflection is how you deepen your learning, and it impacts your productivity, it impacts your performance, and it shapes your success. And there are people think that, oh, reflection is that fuzzy term. What do I reflect about? It feels like I like sit on a cushion in a dark room and think about an experience. That is not what reflection is. Okay, that is not what reflection is. That is absolutely not what reflection is. Reflection is sitting down, taking a moment, just a moment, could be 5 minutes, to think about, okay, who were the players involved? What was the things that were said? How did I feel? What did I do? What were my actions? When you think about these things and you document them, especially based on your experience, you deepen the learning at a whole new level. Okay, at a whole new level. So many things you can reflect about. You can reflect about the highlights and lowlights of your day, week, or month. You can reflect about major career moments, when you became a manager, when you got promoted, when you did some big presentation, when you got some really important and useful feedback. You can write down decisions you made. You can write down learnings you've had. You can vent about something instead of venting to a coworker, which I highly don't recommend. Vent in Career Companion and just write it down and get it out of your system, right? You can read all these articles and videos and books, reflect on them, think about them. Like, I'll give you an example. The way I read, I'm reading this new book, Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. It's really good. And you can see I'm like highlighting things, I'm reading. This is one level of deepening an experience. And then what I do is I actually go and write down like maybe 3 to 5 paragraphs of what I learned after I'm done reading the book. And the knowledge deepens and it stays with me for much longer, right? So the most important thing that you can do in your career is reflect on your experiences, on all the experiences that you have, and document them and go back to them and use them as guides for your next actions and your next goals. All right. So a few things, there's 3 things that I want to close with for the content piece, and then we'll move to Q&A. One is this concept of leadership, right? So I really love this quote, leadership is not an action, but leadership is an action, not a position. So people think that, hey, in order for me to be a leader, I have to manage someone. Absolutely not. You do not have to have anybody reporting to you. You do not have to have someone managing you to lead them. It happens through influence. When you influence people, I cannot tell you how many times in my career people come to me, even at my jobs, and they're like, hey, can you give me some guidance on how I should deal with this situation? Can you give me some tips on what I should do here? And that is me influencing them and leading them. That's not me managing them, right? And that will bring out your leadership capabilities naturally. And when your superiors and your peers see that and they see a natural leader in you, you will get promoted to a leadership position. So think about leadership as something that starts as an action, not as a position. And really what leaders do, it comes down to 3 things. They solve problems, they create opportunities for people, and they achieve results. That is literally what leadership is about. You do those 3 things in your job now, you are a leader, even if you don't have someone reporting to you. As long as you're doing those 3 things, you are being a leader and you're influencing people. And in that, the most important one is creating opportunities for people. That is the most important thing you can do as a leader, is create opportunities. Next, I always hear this all the time, like, hey, I don't have time to manage my career. It's so hard. Looking for a job is hard. Doing this is hard. One thing that it has really helped me for the past 10 years is there is a calendar invite for 30 minutes on my calendar every week where I check in on my career. Okay, whether I reflect or I'm attending an event or I'm just like updating my resume, there is something I'm doing 30 minutes on a weekly basis to make my career better, to grow my career, to better know myself, to better understand to check in on my goals, to take a personality test. There are literally, I could come up with a list of 100 things you can do in those 30 minutes. But if you break it down, okay, if you have 5 minutes, even if you just have 5 minutes this week, just reflect. Go in and reflect on something, some experience. If you have 15 minutes, write down or check in on your goals. What are your goals? How are you doing on them? What actions do you need to take to achieve those goals? If you have 30 minutes, go and answer those questions that I showed you. Answer like 10 questions. Take 30 minutes, answer 10 questions. And if you have an hour, you can go to a networking event, you can take a course, you can connect with people, and you can still reflect. Reflection can be a 1-minute exercise, could be a 60-minute exercise, right? So no matter where you are in your journey, no matter how much you might be busy, I know there's a lot of things going on in this world with family, with health, but there is always time to focus on the things that are important to you, especially your career, because you spend so much time. You spend like 70% of your time, of your awake hours, on your career. So it is not possible that people don't have 5 to 30 minutes in a week to do something to help you take your career to the next level. And then finally, as I have this tool, and it's free, I'm doing this because I'm passionate about this and helping people be their CEOs of their career. You can go to this website, My Personalized Plan, and I will build you a specific plan. Tell me where you are now, tell me where you want to go, and I'll build you a specific plan with specific action items in Career Companion that you can do to really grow your career and navigate the complexities of today's world, especially in today's business environment. So I will end with that. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'll take questions. Let me stop sharing and let Melly speak. Here's Melly.
Can you put that free thing that you're doing, the plan thing, that's very high value?
Yes.
Like put it in, can you put it in the chat?
Yes. Oh,
Thank you.
to someone privately. There you go. So that is the content portion. I know that's a lot of content to consume. Happy to send the slides over if it's useful for people, and then can spend about 5 to 7 minutes answering questions you guys might have. Or share thoughts, comments.
I have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna let people, digest this. I already wrote like 5 or 7.
Being asked if we can get the slides. Yes, I will be sending out the slides to the attendees a little bit later today. Okay, Melly, why don't you ask the questions, because people may have the questions you're asking, or as a kickstart to get other people to ask questions.
Okay, so you mentioned, one of the most important things that you can do is give people your time or information, right? So time is super easy to digest. But when you say information, what kind of information is appropriate and generally well received in a work setting, right?
So I would bucket this into 2 things. So external information and internal information. So external is like outside of the work. So an article, let's say you work as a data scientist and you find some cool article on the newest experimentation models. And so you can share that with your coworkers. Yeah, I saw this article on Medium that kind of explains different experimentation models. Just wanted to share that with you. Thought you might find it interesting. Okay, so that's external. Podcasts, books. I mean, I'm constantly sharing. I read a book a week and I'm constantly like sharing, hey, I found this really cool book you should read. Hey, I found this really cool book you should read. So books, articles, podcasts are great. From internal information within the company, at least for me in the role that I'm in, I have access to a lot of information that other people may not, because I sit on a cross-functional team where I see like what the overall strategy is and what the plans are. And so I become that connector, like, hey, here's a new strategy we've put together. You may not have seen it, just wanted to share it with you and see if you had any thoughts or ideas, right? So as long as it's okay and it's not confidential or privileged information within that team, and you have to like really think about that, you can share that internally with people who may not have access to that info, and they would greatly appreciate that. Like one of the things I found at Uber was like this website of all these cool photos that are like Uber specific photos, and I knew the design team had it, but the engineering team did not have that link. And sometimes they like to get creative and make presentations. So I sent it to them and like, oh my God, this is super useful. I'm always like Googling for Uber photos. Now I can use this internal branded, really cool photos, right? So there's you can share an external.
Mm-hmm. But the key word here, it's not confidential.
Not confidential, that's right.
Okay. I'm gonna ask to see if anybody else has questions.
Hi, this is Pamela. Hi, Honey and Lily. I have a question. I wanted to just, if you could give examples of creating opportunities as a leader, because I think, some of us might think of that a little bit narrowly, like, for example, oh, I connected so-and-so and got to help get this person a job, but what other kinds of opportunities actually could you consider opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest ways that I have personally provided opportunities for people is looping them in on projects where it might not be part of their day-to-day job to do, or even their role profile, but they might find it interesting to do. And so, for example, I was working on a project internally on headcount and managing headcount for the team. And so I found a data scientist who has nothing to do with headcount. And I was like, hey, do you want to help out here and help us run some analysis on like what the ratios are, how many people we have in each location? This is something easily that I could do. I could have put this data together. Someone that reports to me managed could have put this together, but I created this opportunity for someone externally, or someone outside of my team. They were curious about it. It was information that was anyways going to be shared with a lot of people. And I was like, hey, if you're interested in a project or a task, and if you have maybe 30 minutes this week to do this, would love for you to do it. And they got exposure to something. They got to use their skill set. They felt like they contributed to something bigger outside of their job, and something bigger that was important for the company. And so it's okay to loop in people that it's not part of their daily job, to be like, hey, wanted to see if you had any thoughts on this. Hey, I wanted to see if you wanted to contribute here, and let me connect you, right? So outside of, like you said, just giving people, like connecting them to jobs, or like, let me introduce you to someone, actually having them take an action on something is a huge way to create opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's an excellent one.
Very good question.
Any other questions?
Okay, nobody talking. I'm gonna talk. So, what about people who are like networking averse? Okay, so I have people on my team. I've worked people with in the past, and when you drop the N word, not that word, but the networking word, they're just like they get this face. They just like you know what I mean? Like, it's like, so for me, I would rather use a word like, make friends with new people or whatever, right? But like in the end, like, what is the difference between networking and like genuinely being interested in people, or is it the same?
Yeah, I think it's the same. And I would say, like, before, I was probably one of those people like networking, like, I don't want to network, because when people, we have this like mindset that networking is like, you go to an event, you hand out a business card, you give your 2-minute elevator pitch on who you are, you take their business card and you send them a LinkedIn request and or connection, and that's it. That's networking. That is not networking, because if there is someone that you are not willing, there are so many people that are connected to me on LinkedIn. I am not comfortable reaching out to a lot of them for a job opportunity. Like if there was a role at their company, don't feel comfortable doing that. That is not really a strong network. Those are just like acquaintances that I know. A network is someone that you've actually built a relationship with. So it is the same thing as actually connecting with someone. So think about it almost as like making a friend, right? So you talk to them, you know about them, you personally on a one-on-one, whether Zoom or coffee or happy hour, like depending on the situations we're in, you've met with them and you've talked to them, and you feel comfortable picking up the phone and asking them for a favor. When you have networked successfully, you will feel comfortable picking up a phone and calling them and saying, hey, I need your help here. So I would say that your LinkedIn connections is not necessarily your network, right? That those are people you know of, have worked with, are connected with, but that is not your network. Like I would say my network is probably like 30 to 40 people that I know, that I feel comfortable calling.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I totally agree with everything you said. So we've got questions here. We've got questions, honey. So number one, regarding the tools that you built, where is all the data that is entered, stored on the server or a third-party server? And you process fast. So let me just give you that one question. And then the second one follow-up is also, how is the data that is entered into the tools being used?
Yeah, so the data is stored in the Career Companion servers. They're their own standalone servers, and so it's not integrated. It's not some open web server. These are servers that are paid for, and they are in a private cloud. And the data is processed. So think of it as a CRM. Okay, a company. It is, people know what a CRM. It's a customer relationship management tool, and the basic concept of CRM is junk in, junk out. So the data that you put in is the data you're going to get out. So there isn't anything special that happens in the back end or it's shared with somebody. None of that happens. This is all information that you're tracking for your own purpose in a more organized way, instead of like a Google Doc or a Google slide. So there are pages that you have that you can access at any time you want to be like, okay, who did I interview with at that one time? What were the goals that I set? What are my competencies? So it's all information for you to consume, not for anybody else to consume. So nobody else can see it unless you share it with them.
Good question. Great questions. All right, people, we're about to close up. You should really ask if you need to ask something. Don't be shy.
Yes. Any last questions?
I have one more question regarding relationships. How do you, from your experience, like qualify, okay, this is a quality relationship. I want to keep this. I want to grow this. I want to nurture it. Because there are people in your career who you might have conflict with outright, your personalities just clash or you just don't click, but you try to park your biases and you really try to create a relationship, at least a working relationship. But how do you really know which ones to really cultivate?
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
Oh, that is so good.
Yeah. So relationships, I would say, are so one of the things about relationships is it's a two-way street. Okay, so if you are trying to build a relationship with someone, but they're not really interested, you're not going to build a relationship with them. You're just pushing yourself on them. Okay. So I would say in a little bit of a spiritual terms, the vibes have to match. Okay. They have to be interested in building a relationship with you as much as you are interested in building a relationship with them. And I would say there's 3 categories of people in your career. There's people that you just transact with. You work with them, you know them, you have projects with them. There's people that you like get to know a little bit better. You talk to them on a daily basis. You have a good relationship. You feel comfortable sharing some personal things with them. They're kind of like your friends at work. Okay. And then there's people in your career that are your lifelong friends. So there might be like 3 to 5. I would say out of all my jobs that I've had 3 to 5 people that are my friends today that will get invited to my wedding, that I connect with on a daily, that I send either Christmas cards or Happy New Year notes to, that remember my birthdays. I remember their birthdays. And yes, they were my coworkers at one point, but they are now my friends, and friends at a level that I don't necessarily hang out with them on a weekly or a monthly basis, but I connect with them often enough where I feel like I have a relationship with them, right? So think about the buckets of relationship. Like every time you meet, every time you're trying to figure out, like, do I build a relationship with you? Just the mental check that I do is like, do I want this person at my wedding? Do I want them at my Christmas party? Do I want to wish them Happy New Year? Do I want to remember their birthday, right? Like I literally, that is the checklist that I go through to think that, am I going to have a long-term relationship with this person? Or is it more transactional where I'm just going to, you have those biases, you have those differences, the personality differences. And then there's people that like every day at work, they're your friends, but they may not be your friends after you leave that job. Does that make sense?
Okay, so this is such a good question, but I love the bucket. I love the bucketing, so number 1, transactional. Okay, so I like keywords. And then number 2 is what, like you just get along with, or
yeah,
what?
Work friends. They're like
work friends. Okay, and then number 3, I said homies. Like that's your homies, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed this and learned a lot. I will send over the slides and all the links, so don't worry about that. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need anything at all. And Albert, thank you again for inviting me and hosting me. And Melly, thank you again for keeping the energies up here.
Yeah, thank you for coming again, honey. And also for those of you who've joined us today, thank you as well for joining us and spending some of your Thursday night here. So in addition to what you experienced tonight, we've got a variety of other events coming up that you can also attend. Next Monday, join us for a mock interview with Tony Casara, who's a senior software engineer. If you're somebody who works in accounting or finance, we'd love to have you for one of these mock interviews upcoming, because we haven't had anybody in that area since we started doing our mock interviews 6 months ago. Next Wednesday, we also have another webinar on how college students can find their next job or internship during COVID-19. So if you have a new grad or a college kid in your life, or that's you yourself, feel free to join us. And so finally, everything else that you need is in our community. And also Honey will also be emailing you a lot of the stuff that she went over today. In the week ahead, we look forward to your success stories, job postings, and advice to help drive your success. We'll see you soon in the community, and we wish you all the best as you look for your next opportunity. Goodbye, everybody.
Have a good evening.